Okay, we're off. Action.
I think because Gavin is in Spain, I'll do a Spanish fly.
Yeah.
This fly is called the Perdigon, or I don't know how to pronounce it in Spanish, but let's just call it the Perdigon. So Perdigon, as far as I understand, is Spanish for pellet. Now, before you get too excited, this is not an imitation of a pellet. It just makes the sound of a pellet when you cast it into the water. So that's why they call it the pellet. This the crucial aspect of this fly is that as few thread wraps as you possibly can. Do not do a single wrap that you don't have to. The more slender you can do this pattern, the better. It's all about getting down quickly. So this pattern became sort of famous about 6 years ago, and it's now become sort of a stock standard for your competitive fishermen. They all have this fly in the box. What makes this different is that this is a size 16 nymph hook. I like the Hanax 230s, and a slotted bead on a normal nymph hook. Now that is not usually how it works. You put a slotted bead on a jig hook and a countersunk on a normal nymph hook. Now this is where the difference comes in. You're actually putting a slotted bead on a normal nymph hook, and the reason for that is when you tie it in, you're going to try and offset it to the top, so it turns around when you cast it into the water, so it acts like a jig. So you're basically fishing a jig without having to fish a jig. So I use Nano 12-0 because it's a very strong and very, very thin thread. Even for a 12-0 it seems it's quite flat, so it doesn't create a lot of bulk. If you've got thinner thread than that, if you've got 16-0, 18-0, 20-0, 22-0, 24-0, use it as thin as you can get away with, because the thinner, again, the better. So the first thing you do is you want to line up your bead with this slot to the top so that you can push it up against the hook. And you'll start it at the top, just a couple of thread wraps, and you'll try, and this is not the best bead, but you'll try and push this hook up as much as possible.
So you just hold it up with thread?
Yeah, so you will build a little thread body just to push that hook up.
Push the bead up.
Push the bead up. Right. Okay, now you tie in your tail. Now usually you'll do a thread wrap till there, and then you tie in the tail. Not needed. Again, you're trying to minimize your thread wraps as much as possible. Then you use coq de leon. Now any Spanish fly will have coq de leon on it as a standard. Do not use more than 3 fibers. If you want to use 2, that's also perfectly fine, but try and not use more than 3 ever. It just delays the sink rate. Right, so now the thing is, I think that's 2, that's fine. The thing is with flies is that tails, mayfly tails are, in my mind, and to a lot of competitive fishermen, completely irrelevant. If it doesn't actually move properly, like marabou or a big clump of CDC or anything like that, if it doesn't actually show proper movement, it has no function. So for all intents and purposes, hello Mariki, for all intents and purposes, a mayfly tail, especially with coq de leon, is so that the fly fisherman doesn't feel bad about himself. But it is purely cosmetic. It's purely cosmetic. The fish doesn't have the intelligence, the eyesight, or the willpower to see 3, 4, 5, 7, or 9 coq de leon fibers. Well, it'll see 9, but I mean, it won't see 2, 3, or 4. It's just not possible. So this is purely just for cosmetic reasons. A lot of the Spanish and a lot of the Czechs don't even put tails on their flies. Just don't do it. It's just not necessary. So, but we also tie flies because we like it to look pretty. So that's why I put it on tail. So as you can see, there's a bare hook shank, and this is 2 coq de leon fibers. Now, it doesn't have to be long. You can do it as long as the hook shank, even shorter is fine. I'll do even shorter. So I'll do a pinch wrap, and you'll just slowly go back to there. Yeah, it's actually 3, sorry. That's all you need, nothing more than that.
How far have you taken it down? I can't see it.
How far have I taken what down?
The wrap down.
The wrap about halfway.
Basically to
No, any tie-in point where just before the bend. There's that crucial tie-in point before you go down the bend and before it's so it's just before the bend starts. It's basically when you do any dry fly tail, anything really on any fly just before the bend starts. Alright, so that's it. So as you can see, the nice thing also by not using thread at the back is it's actually already building a taper. So it's a very minor taper, but it's a taper nonetheless.
Can I sit closer? I can't make it more in focus.
Okay, so
It's a size 16.
I'll just take off the excess. Then I've got a bit of flash here that's brown and green. Now this fly is what the juniors, this material is what the juniors used in Spain just a couple of weeks ago, and this fly is called the gasolinas, which basically is petrol. So it's almost got that petrol-like color. Okay, so what you need to do now is you tie it in. You can put it all the way to the bead. It's a self-improved clinch. My pinch loop without doing a pinch. Okay, then you just go forward. Okay, so and this is where the white becomes really important, because the white helps push up light through the flash, just because it's brighter. If it's dark, you'll get a different coloring. Maybe that's something that you like. Maybe it gives you a good color. It's all good, but for the most part, you use white because you want the color of the flash to shine through. Okay, so now you just pull it and you just wrap it forward. And as you pull it, the kink will go out of it. And when you get to the end, now that's all the way to the end. You'll just do 2 or 3 more, just so that when you do your whip finish, it'll actually cut through it and the white won't stand out too much. 1, 2. Okay, so 1 through. Again, no point in going 3, 4, 4, 5 times. Just 1 is enough. You don't need to bulk it up too much. So that's the flash. Cut the flash off. You do a single whip finish. Okay, now you can it's quite out of focus, isn't it?
I think it's the size.
Just put the white behind the tablecloth.
Either way, I'll bring it around and you guys will see. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. I'll bring it around. Okay, so the point is, you just to sum up, bit of a thread bump in the front to push the bead up. You go about halfway back, put in the coq de leon, tie it on the bare hook shank. Get to the end, only 3 fibers, nothing more. You get to the end, you tie in your flash, just go to the front, and then that's the fly. And now this is where the interesting part comes in, and this is what makes it sink so well, and this is why it's so effective. So the next thing you do is you'll take your fly and you'll put it in the vise facing downwards. Okay, and the reason why you do this is when you use your UV resin, you want everything to go down. I see even guys on YouTube, they put it on normally and they put the UV resin on and they kind of move it around and everything, and I think then they get like 10,000 hits, and I'm thinking, really? So you try and avoid doing that. You're gonna take your bodkin and you're gonna push it towards one direction only, to the bottom only, so it gives you a super smooth taper. Again, don't clump an enormous amount of UV resin. You need as little as you can get away with. You're just pushing it down. The thinner, the better. This is an anorexic fly. That's the whole point of it. Right. Okay, so a little bit of UV resin. Just put on the top, to the sides, and you just stroke it down the whole time. You don't want to push this, you don't want to go up and down ever. This way everything flows down and you get the best taper possible. Right, you use your UV torch. Alright, so that is a very thin, well covered taper now. And now the thing is with slotted beads also is that little gap in there with the slotted bead always creates some kind of drag. The water pushes up into it and it doesn't allow the fly to sink as quickly as it could. Now this is all super technical way of thinking about your fly, trying to get it down as quickly as possible. Every little edge helps you get down, and the quicker you get down, the quicker you get to fish. So the UV resin in this case did actually go all the way over into the slot, so that's completely covered, which is exactly what I want. And now I'll take my marker pen just to do a little wing case, and a wing case just like that. The nice thing about a wing case is that, especially on a jig hook, is that it goes down like this, and the wing case is here, it goes down like this, and this is what the fish often see. The fish will see the wing case and they almost see that as your initial trigger. It's one of the triggers, one of the first things they would see if a fly is coming down is the wing case. So that is one important trigger to put into the fly. So now, and I want to augment that trigger as much as I can within reason. So you've got your little bit of black wing case there, just a little bit of UV resin again, just on the top, just to give it a bit of a bump. Again, always down. And yeah, that should do it. Now, what I've noticed is that UV resin kind of goes dull and discolors after a couple of months or a couple of years even. If you've got the really good quality stuff, it'll take a while, but the bad quality stuff will go funny, you go kind of like an odd color quite quickly. So what I do is I take a bit of Sally Hansen's and I'll just cover it just to help it maintain that shine. Again, I don't want to cover it too much. And then you just let that dry. And that's the Perdigon nymph. Now, this fly has got pretty much no resistance. There's 3 little coq-de-lion fibers, which is very, very thin and quite stiff. So there's no resistance on the water pretty much against this. The rest is super thin. It's completely covered in UV resin. The bead is also covered. It sinks immediately. It goes very, very fast. So this is not really a fly you'll fish in small streams in this country. It'll just go in the bottom, boing, and that's it. So, but this is perfect for bigger rivers like the Vaal and for the Orange River especially. You can oversize the bead if you want to. You can use different sizes. My control flies these days are pretty much like this, except just without the coq-de-lion tail, just chartreuse with my gold bead, 1 layer of thread, and I'll just cover it in UV resin. So it's super thin, there's no resistance, and it goes down immediately, which allows you to fish smaller flies and get down quicker. Because in the old days, well, old days being 2-3 years ago even, you have to fish a size 8 with a bazillion wraps of lead and a tungsten bead. That thing is about as thick as can be. You're trying to cast that thing down, it doesn't go down nearly as quickly as it should given the amount of weight that you've got. So this really, really sinks well. Now, so if you're fishing the Vaal, you need to get down, especially when you want to get down a small fly to fish. Because guys often fish too big. The mayfly won't be much bigger than size 18, 16, 14 at a push, but they're trying to get down so they have fish bigger, so they fish 12s. And while most fish will take it, you do get sometimes, especially when you fish populated waters where people are stomping over the water over and over and over again, you want to go in with a smaller fly like this. This fly is also very good for French nymphing, for your anchor fly. Now, this is a fast river fly. It's not for slow rivers. Do not fish it in pools. Do not fish it in small streams. Also, because you fish it in fast water, the fish doesn't have an opportunity to make a decision. It has to take. If it's going to eat, it's going to eat. So that's why you do it. Because the reality of the matter is, and sounds a little contradicting, but it isn't. The best flies are the flies with the most movement. If you've got lots of movement in a fly, that's what will catch you the fish. But the more movement in your fly, the harder you're going to get down. So it's this catch-22. So this is not a lot of movement, but it's going to get you down. So what you may want to consider is fishing this. Maybe just up top you'll fish a little soft tackle, something with a lot of movement. Not too much, so that it actually drags the flies around, but something unweighted, something that'll dangle around a lot, and something with a lot of movement. So the fish will often take that, so you can use this as your anchor fly going down to the bottom. I think that's it.
How would you fish it? Once you've got it in the water, what are you going to do with it?
Well, the thing is, it depends what the fish want. Many ways. You can fish this on dry dropper because it's going to switch over. So you fish it as dry dropper, which is dead drifted. Then you can fish it on a French leader where you cast it forward. You'll probably drag it a little bit quicker. You can cast it diagonally across. It will swing down. You can let it swing and you can drag it up. Any way you want. No, it doesn't really matter as long as you just make it work for you. But because it doesn't have movement, impart movement. Especially when you go down on the drift, twiggle it up. That often works. Or swing it. Whichever way you want. It really doesn't matter. It's what works. It's what the fish wants. Color combinations. This is the Gasolinas. I'll show you now. It's got kind of like a greenish, yellowish tinge to it. The blue and red works really well in deep, dark waters. Gold works really well on yellows. Maybe it looks like a little yellowfish. Who knows? Doubt it. All the color combinations are limitless. The point is, it's a fly that's getting down to fish, and the quicker you get down, the quicker you'll get fish. And it's also quite a durable fly. That's the Perdigon, and I know that the South African team is fishing this fly at the moment, probably.
Yeah. If you want to leave it in there, then people can come and have a look.
Okay.
Okay, people. I've got my own UV clear here and a torch, so be spearing with it. Okay.
They have to make a good fly. So
yeah. So these are the materials there.
Okay, so the slot is pointing that way on the bead,
upwards, yeah.
upwards. And what size bead is that?
that's 2.5.
2.5.
2.5 mils.
Yeah, you can put a 3 mil on it if you want to.
Jeez.
'Cause it's gonna start obscuring the gape though with a 3 mil.
And that hook you said was a size
16.
16. Just a nymph hook, huh?
Yep.
myself in that.